Loretta James was 58 years old when she came home early on a Thursday afternoon and found her husband of 32 years in their guest room, with her son's wife. She had made Raymond's coffee that same morning. 2 sugars, no cream, the same way she had done it every day since 1992. He picked it up without looking at her. He never looked at her anymore. He had already started calling himself basically separated at industry conferences. Without her knowledge, without her name. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring in the photos. That same night, when Loretta called her son Devontae and told him what she had seen, he went quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up with red eyes and whispered, "Mom, I already knew." 2 people who had been protecting each other through silence, now sitting in the wreckage of it together. What Raymond did not know, what neither he nor Brianna had any reason to suspect, was that Loretta had spent 30 years quietly building something neither of them had ever bothered to understand. She sat down at her desk, opened a legal pad, and began writing. He had no idea what room he was already standing in. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. Through the kitchen window, early morning light spilled across the granite countertop where Loretta James measured coffee grounds with the precision of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times before. 2 level scoops into the filter, just enough water for 2 cups. 1 for Raymond, 1 she would pour but probably wouldn't finish. The coffee maker hummed to life, filling the kitchen with its familiar gurgling. Loretta wiped down the already spotless counter, her movements automatic, efficient. The house around her stood as testament to 32 years of similar careful attention. Gleaming hardwood floors, family photos arranged just so, every surface dusted and organized with methodical care. She glanced at the photos on the wall as she reached for Raymond's favorite mug. Their wedding day, Devontae's graduation, family vacations where everyone smiled right on cue. The images told a story of success, of a life well arranged. But lately, Loretta found herself looking at these photos differently, like artifacts from a museum exhibit about someone else's happiness. The coffee finished brewing. 2 sugars, no cream. The way Raymond had taken it since before Devontae was born. Loretta poured it carefully, timing it so it would be exactly the right temperature when Raymond came downstairs. She had gotten good at these small calculations over the years. Her hand brushed absently across her chest, an unconscious gesture she'd developed since the surgery 6 years ago. Stage 1 breast cancer, caught early. She'd been lucky, the doctors said. But luck hadn't prevented the changes that followed. The weight that settled around her middle during treatment and never quite left. The gray hairs she'd stopped coloring. The way her clothes hung differently on her softer frame. Raymond had changed too, though his changes were less visible. More business trips, later nights at the office, shorter conversations over dinner. When he did talk, it was usually about work, his latest sales numbers, office politics, the regional director position he was angling for. He saved his charm for clients and colleagues, doling it out at work functions where Loretta stood quietly beside him, nodding and smiling as he held court. She heard his footsteps on the stairs now, the familiar creak of the 3rd step from the bottom. Raymond appeared in his navy suit, already checking his phone. He moved past her to grab his coffee, not acknowledging the perfect temperature, the measured sugars, the daily precision of this morning ritual. "Brianna's coming over Thursday," he said, eyes still on his screen. "While Devontae's out of town. She needs help with some tax documents." Loretta nodded, though he wasn't looking at her. "What time should I expect her?" "Around 2. She has all the paperwork ready." He took a long sip of coffee. "Can you make sure everything's sorted before the filing deadline?" "Of course." Loretta managed their own taxes, Devontae's taxes, and those of her dozen bookkeeping clients. What was one more set of documents to organize? Raymond finished his coffee in 3 more efficient swallows. He grabbed his briefcase from beside the kitchen door, checked his reflection in the hallway mirror, and straightened his tie. "Dinner meeting tonight. Don't wait up." The front door closed behind him with a soft click. Loretta stood in the sudden quiet of the house, listening to his car start in the driveway. She moved to the hallway mirror where Raymond had just checked his appearance, studying her own reflection. The woman looking back at her was softer than she used to be, in more ways than just the physical. Her hair had gone from pepper and salt to mostly salt, worn in a practical style that required minimal maintenance. Her clothes were chosen for comfort rather than statement. Neutral colors, loose fits, nothing that drew attention. When had she started dressing to disappear? Something sat uneasily in her stomach as she turned away from the mirror. A feeling she couldn't or wouldn't name. The same feeling that surfaced when Raymond's phone lit up with late-night messages, or when he came home wearing a different cologne than the one he'd left with. She had gotten good at ignoring these small alarms, filing them away in the same mental drawer where she kept other uncomfortable truths about their marriage. Loretta returned to her desk in the converted back room, where client folders waited in neat stacks. She had work to do, papers to organize, other people's numbers to balance. She was good at that, making sense of other people's chaos, bringing order to their confusion. She opened the first folder and began to work, pushing down that nameless feeling the way she had learned to push down so many things over the years. The morning sun had reached its peak when Loretta pulled into her driveway at noon, 3 hours earlier than planned. Her client, Mrs. Peterson, had called to cancel their afternoon appointment, something about a family emergency that would keep her from reviewing the quarterly reports. Loretta had assured her it wasn't a problem. They'd reschedule for next week. She noticed Raymond's silver Mercedes parked in its usual spot and frowned. He'd mentioned a lunch meeting across town with potential investors, the kind of meeting he'd been having more frequently lately, always with people she never quite met. The car's presence felt wrong, like a misplaced piece in an otherwise perfectly arranged puzzle. The house stood quiet and still in the midday heat. Loretta turned her key in the lock with practiced care, the same way she did everything, deliberately, precisely, without unnecessary noise. The foyer welcomed her with familiar shadows, family photos watching from their careful arrangements on the walls. She set her keys on the wooden hook by the door, the one Raymond had installed decades ago when they'd first moved in. Her leather bag settled softly on the hardwood floor beside the entry table. The house felt different at this hour, like walking into someone else's home by mistake. The air conditioner hummed steadily, masking any other sounds. Loretta stood perfectly still for a moment, listening. Nothing seemed immediately out of place. The living room looked exactly as she'd left it that morning, throw pillows arranged just so, magazines fanned carefully on the coffee table, everything in its assigned space. She'd spent 32 years learning how to keep a house this way, how to maintain the appearance of perfect order. Her low heels made no sound on the hardwood as she moved through the house. Past the kitchen with its spotless counters and morning's coffee cup still drying in the rack. Past the formal dining room where they rarely ate anymore, the table set with plates that gathered dust between holidays. Toward the back of the house where the guest room sat across from her home office. The guest room door stood slightly ajar, maybe 4 inches of space between door and frame. Loretta approached with the same quiet efficiency she applied to everything, each step measured and controlled. But as she drew closer, something made her stop. A sound, a movement, something that didn't belong in an empty house at noon on a Thursday. Through the gap in the door, she saw them. Her husband of 32 years and her son's wife of 4. The sight registered with the same clinical precision she used to balance her client's books. Raymond's dress shirt on the floor. Brianna's blouse draped over the chair. The guest bed with its carefully pressed duvet now twisted and disturbed. Their bodies moving together in the stripe of sunlight that cut through the half-drawn blinds. Loretta did not gasp. She did not cry out. Her body went completely terrifyingly still. The stillness of a prey animal that knows movement means death. But she was not prey. And this was not death. This was something else entirely. She backed away from the door with the same careful silence she'd used to approach it. Down the hallway. Past the formal dining room with its unused plates. Through the kitchen where she'd made Raymond's coffee that morning. Into her office, where she closed the door with a soft click and sat down at her desk. Her laptop opened with a quiet whir. The screen glowed to life, showing the same spreadsheet she'd been working on that morning. Her hands did not shake as she reached for her phone. They remained perfectly steady as she dialed Devontae's number and listened to it ring through to voicemail. She typed a text message. "Call me when you can. No rush." The words appeared in neat blue bubbles on the screen. Simple, casual, nothing to suggest the world had shifted on its axis. From somewhere in the house she heard movement. Footsteps. A door opening and closing. A car starting in the driveway, Brianna leaving, probably to return to whatever life she lived when she wasn't destroying someone else's. Loretta sat very still, her face arranged in the same pleasant mask she'd worn to 100 business dinners at Raymond's side. More footsteps in the hallway. A knock at her office door. Raymond's voice, casual and warm. "Hey, honey. Want me to pick up dinner on my way home?" "Sure, honey." Her voice emerged smooth and untroubled, like polished glass. "Whatever you feel like." She listened to him leave, to his car pulling out of the driveway for the second time that day. The house settled into silence around her. The same silence she'd lived inside for years, thinking it was peace when it was really just the sound of her own compliance. Loretta sat alone in her immaculate office, in her immaculate house, and understood with perfect clarity that she had been a fool. Not because she wasn't smart enough to see the signs. She'd seen them all, catalogued them with the same precision she applied to her clients' ledgers. She had been a fool because she had loved someone who counted on her not to look. She opened the bottom drawer of her desk and removed a legal pad. Her hand was steady as she picked up a pen. The evening air hung heavy and still as Loretta sat on her back porch, watching the sun sink behind the neighbor's oak tree. Her phone buzzed in her lap, Devontae's name lighting up the screen. She answered on the first ring, keeping her voice steady and measured. "Hi, baby. Thanks for calling back." Something in her tone must have given her away. Devontae knew his mother's voice the way she knew his footsteps, the way she could tell his mood from how he closed a car door. "Mom, what's wrong? Can you come over?" She kept her words even, controlled. "Nothing urgent. Just need to talk to you about something." There was a brief pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Devontae's car pulled into the driveway exactly 19 minutes later. Loretta watched from the porch as he emerged, tall like his father, but carrying himself differently, quieter, more contained. He took the porch steps 2 at a time but stopped short when he saw her face in the fading light. "Sit with me," she said, gesturing to the wooden chair beside her. The same chair where she'd read him stories when he was small, where she'd listened to his teenage worries, where she'd helped him practice his wedding vows 4 years ago. Devontae lowered himself into the chair, his eyes never leaving her face. "Mom, you're scaring me." Loretta folded her hands in her lap, the way she did when delivering difficult news to clients. "I came home early today. My afternoon appointment canceled." She told him everything with the same precise detail she applied to her bookkeeping. The car in the driveway, the quiet house, the guest room door, what she saw through the gap. She didn't spare him the details, but she didn't dramatize them either. Just facts, laid out like numbers in a ledger. When she finished, silence settled between them like a heavy blanket. Devontae's shoulders curved forward, his head dropping into his hands. The porch light clicked on automatically, casting harsh shadows across his bowed form. Long moments passed. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed and wet. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I already knew." Loretta felt something shift in her chest, not breaking, but realigning. "Tell me." 5 months ago, he said, staring out into the darkening yard. "I found messages on her phone. So many messages. Going back, I don't even know how long." His hands clenched and unclenched in his lap. "I confronted her that night. She cried. Said it was nothing, just inappropriate texting that got out of hand. Swore it never went further than that." "And you believed her?" Loretta kept her voice gentle, free of judgment. "I wanted to." He laughed, a hollow sound. "God, Mom, I wanted to so badly, because the alternative meant everything was a lie. My marriage, my life. What kind of man doesn't see this coming? What kind of son lets his father?" His voice broke. Loretta reached across the space between them and took his hand. His fingers were cold despite the warm evening. "You didn't let anyone do anything. Their choices are not your responsibility. I should have told you." Fresh tears spilled onto his cheeks. "I was ashamed. And I kept thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe if I just worked harder or was home more or—" "Stop." Loretta's voice was firm but tender. "You are not responsible for their betrayal. Neither of us is." They sat together in the growing darkness, holding hands the way they had when he was small and afraid of thunderstorms. Now they were both afraid, but of something far more devastating than weather. "What do we do?" Devante finally asked. Loretta squeezed his hand once before releasing it. "Tonight we do nothing." She turned to face him fully. "I need you to go home and act completely normal. Can you do that?" He nodded slowly. "For how long?" "Give me a few days. I need to think clearly before anyone makes any moves." She reached up and touched his cheek, wiping away a tear with her thumb. "We're going to handle this. But we're going to handle it right." Devante stood, his frame straightening as if drawing strength from her certainty. He hugged her tightly before leaving, and she held him like she had when he was small enough to carry. After his car disappeared down the street, Loretta went back inside. The kitchen lights cast a harsh glow over the table where she sat down with her legal pad. Sleep felt impossible, unnecessary. She began to write, her pen moving steadily across the yellow pages. By morning, she had filled several pages with meticulous notes. Joint accounts. The house deed. Raymond's pension details. The rental property they'd bought in 2019. Every asset they'd built together over 32 years. Everything that belonged to her by law and by right, laid out in her precise handwriting. The morning sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon when Loretta picked up her phone. She had been awake for hours, the legal pad beside her filled with neat rows of numbers and notes. The kitchen clock showed 6:09 a.m. exactly as she dialed her sister's number. Glenda answered on the second ring, alert despite the early hour. "Loretta? What's wrong?" "I need you to come over," Loretta said, her voice calm and measured. "And bring your notary stamp." There was a brief pause on the line. "I'll be there in an hour." No questions. No hesitation. That was Glenda, direct and practical, traits honed by 30 years as a paralegal. Loretta heard Raymond moving around upstairs, getting ready for work. She went through the motions of morning. Coffee made, newspaper retrieved, breakfast dishes in the sink. By the time Raymond kissed her cheek and left for work, everything looked normal. Everything felt surreal. Glenda arrived exactly when she said she would, carrying her worn leather briefcase and wearing the expression Loretta recognized from countless family situations that required careful handling. She set her things on the kitchen table and looked at her younger sister. "Tell me everything," she said. Loretta did, laying out the discovery and Devante's revelation with the same precise detail she used in her bookkeeping. Glenda listened without interruption, her face showing nothing but focused attention. When Loretta finished, Glenda pulled out a yellow legal pad, so similar to Loretta's from the night before, and clicked her pen. "How long has this been going on?" she asked, her first question cutting straight to the heart. "I only discovered it yesterday," Loretta replied, "but Devante found messages 5 months ago. Beyond that," she spread her hands. "I don't know yet." Glenda nodded, making a note. "Whose name is on what?" Loretta pulled out her own legal pad. "The house is in both our names. We opened an equity line 2 years ago. That's joint too. His 401k has me listed as the beneficiary. The rental property we bought in 2019 is in both names, but I manage everything about it. Maintenance, tenants, income deposits." "And do you have full access to all financial accounts?" "Yes. Joint checking, joint savings, investment account." Loretta paused, then added, "And there's something else." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a single bank statement. "I have a private account, opened it in 2009, started it for household emergencies, but..." She handed the statement to Glenda. "I kept adding to it, just a little each month, never touched it." Glenda's eyebrow raised as she looked at the balance. "He doesn't know about it?" "He never asked." Loretta's voice was steady. "Never questioned where the household money went or how I managed it. Just assumed everything was handled." "Good," Glenda said simply, adding it to her notes. She opened her briefcase and pulled out her notary stamp. "Let's make copies of everything. Every account statement, every deed, every insurance policy. Then I'm calling Barbara." "Barbara?" "My friend from the firm. Best divorce attorney in 3 counties. Not to file anything," Glenda added quickly. "Just a consultation. We need to know where you stand legally before anyone makes any moves." For the next 2 hours, they worked methodically, Glenda made copies of everything, her notary stamp marking each one with official authenticity. They built a preliminary asset list, with Glenda's practiced eye catching details Loretta might have missed. They organized everything into clear categories: real estate, retirement accounts, insurance policies, investment accounts, monthly expenses. "Don't tell anyone else yet," Loretta said as they finished. "Not even at Monday's consultation. I need to think this through carefully." "Of course." Glenda packed the copied documents into a separate folder. "I'll keep these at my house. Safer that way." After Glenda left, Loretta moved through her day with mechanical precision. She cleaned the kitchen, removing all evidence of their morning's work. She started a new file on her computer, labeled simply Personal Documents 2023. She took client calls, reviewed tax forms, answered emails. When Raymond came home that evening, dinner was on the table, chicken the way he liked it, vegetables steamed just right. He told her about his day, about a difficult meeting with the regional office, about plans for next quarter. She listened and nodded in all the right places, asked the expected questions. Raymond noticed nothing different about her at all. 2 days had passed since Glenda's visit, and Devante sat alone in his home office, his laptop open before him. Brianna was at yoga class, her Wednesday routine, giving him the privacy he needed. His mother's instructions echoed in his mind. "Look carefully, but change nothing about your behavior." He opened an old email account Brianna had shared with him years ago, back when they were planning their wedding. She'd given him the password then, Dev and Bry 2019, to coordinate with vendors. She never changed it, probably forgot she'd even given him access. His hands trembled slightly as he logged in. The inbox loaded, showing years of accumulated messages. He started with the oldest ones, scanning subject lines, looking for his father's name. There, an email from 3 years ago, the subject line reading, "Re-mentorship discussion." Devante clicked. His throat tightened as he read, "Brianna, I'm happy to guide you through the corporate landscape. Someone with your potential deserves proper mentorship. Let's meet for coffee next week to discuss your career goals." The reply from Brianna, "Thank you so much, Raymond. Having someone like you as a mentor means everything." He kept reading, moving forward through time. The messages grew longer, more frequent. The tone shifted from professional to personal. Raymond asking about her day, Brianna sharing her thoughts, her fears, her ambitions. Coffee meetings became lunch meetings. Lunch meetings became dinner discussions. Then he found it, dated exactly 11 days before his wedding. The subject line was simply, "Tonight." "I can't stop thinking about you," Raymond had written. "What we discussed, I know it's complicated, but some things are worth the risk. You understand me in ways no one else does." Brianna's response came 2 hours later. "I feel the same way. I've never felt so seen, so understood. Whatever this is between us, it's real." Devante's hands were steady now, though his chest felt hollow. He remembered his wedding day with perfect clarity. Raymond standing at the altar as his best man, raising a champagne glass during the reception toast. "Love," Raymond had said, his voice carrying across the reception hall, "is about commitment, about family, about choosing someone and building a life together." The screenshots kept coming. Messages during the honeymoon, late-night emails while Devante was asleep beside his new wife, business trips that lined up perfectly with times Brianna was visiting friends in other cities. He selected every message, every reply, every timestamp, created a single PDF document, added it to an email addressed to his mother. No subject line, no message text, just the evidence, speaking for itself. Send. In her home office, Loretta's computer chimed with the incoming email. She opened it, began to read. Her posture remained perfectly straight, her breathing even. Only her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, revealed any tension. She read every word, every message, every lie wrapped in the language of mentorship, of understanding, of connection. The timestamps told their own story. Messages sent during family dinners, during holidays, during moments when she'd thought her marriage was simply going through a quiet phase. After an hour, she opened a new folder on her computer, named it James Estate Documentation, in clear professional text. She saved the screenshots, began a new document, started building a timeline with the same precise attention she gave her client files. January 15th, 2020. First mentorship email. March 3rd, 2020. First dinner meeting. May 22nd, 2020. First overtly personal message. August 1st, 2020. Raymond's business trip to Chicago, matched with Brianna's girls' weekend in the same city. She cross-referenced everything against her calendar, against bank statements, against Raymond's travel schedule. The pattern emerged with devastating clarity. This wasn't an impulsive mistake or a midlife crisis. This was deliberate, calculated, chosen. Loretta worked until every detail was documented, every connection verified. She printed the complete timeline, placed it in a manila envelope, and locked it in her desk drawer beside the other evidence she'd been gathering. That evening, Raymond came home later than usual. He found her in the kitchen, preparing dinner as if nothing had changed. "I have another work trip next week," he said, kissing her cheek. "Regional sales meeting in Atlanta." Loretta smiled, the expression perfect in its normalcy. "I hope it goes well," she said, and turned back to the stove. The following week stretched like a rubber band in Loretta's mind. Raymond was away on his regional sales meeting in Atlanta, and the house felt both empty and full. Empty of his physical presence, but full of everything she now knew. She sat at her kitchen table on Wednesday morning, her coffee growing cold as she scrolled through her contacts. She paused at Carlos's name, then pressed call. "Loretta?" His voice was warm, familiar. "It's been too long." "I was thinking the same thing," she said, keeping her tone light. "Are you free for lunch today?" "My treat." They met at Marcel's, a quiet restaurant downtown where the booths were spaced far enough apart for private conversation. Carlos stood when she approached the table, greeting her with the easy affection of someone who had known her long enough to mean it. "You look well," he said as they settled into their seats. Loretta noticed he chose the corner booth, always observant, always careful with details. That's why she'd called him. They ordered, Carlos got the salmon, Loretta the chicken piccata, and fell into comfortable conversation about mutual acquaintances, local politics, the changes in their old school district. Loretta let the rhythm build naturally, waiting until their entrees arrived before steering toward what she needed to know. "How's the corporate world treating you these days?" she asked, cutting her chicken with precise movements. "Still consulting for those regional firms?" Carlos set down his fork and looked at her directly. Something in her tone must have signaled this wasn't casual conversation. He dabbed his napkin against his lips, buying a moment to think. "Actually," he said carefully, "there's something I heard last year. I didn't say anything at the time because I wasn't certain, and I didn't want to." He trailed off, studying her face. Loretta kept her expression neutral, encouraging. "Go on." Raymond's been attending these regional conferences, industry events, networking things, and he's been presenting himself as basically separated. The words landed like stones in still water. Loretta's hand remained steady on her fork. "Separated," she repeated. "Not divorced," Carlos clarified. "Not going through something, just separated. Like it's an established fact. He's been doing it for at least 18 months, maybe longer. I heard it from 3 different people at different events." Loretta took a sip of water, giving herself time to process. "That's interesting," she said, her voice level. Carlos reached for his phone. "Here," he said, pulling up a photo. This was from last year's regional conference in Phoenix. Someone posted it in one of the professional groups. He handed her the phone. The image showed about 20 people arranged in typical conference formation, 3 rows, everyone smiling professionally at the camera. Raymond stood in the back row, his arm casual around the shoulders of a woman Loretta didn't recognize. His left hand was visible, resting on the woman's shoulder. No wedding ring. "The woman next to him," Loretta said, her voice still perfectly controlled. "Does she still work with his company?" "Angela? No, she transferred to the Atlanta office about 6 months ago." Carlos watched Loretta's face carefully. Same division as Raymond, different reporting line. Loretta handed the phone back, her mind cataloging every detail. The date, the location, the woman's name, the transfer timeline. The Atlanta connection. She would add it all to her documentation later, each piece fitting into the larger pattern she was building. "Thank you for lunch," she said, reaching for the check before Carlos could move. "It's been wonderful catching up." "Loretta," Carlos said softly as they stood to leave. "If you need anything." She touched his arm gently. "I know, and I appreciate it more than I can say." The drive home was silent. No radio, no phone calls, just the steady hum of her tires on pavement and the even steadier rhythm of her thoughts. In her office, she opened the James Estate documentation folder and created a new entry. She typed out Carlos's account, noting the dates, the multiple conferences, the consistent presentation of their marriage as effectively over. She attached the conference photo, marked the date, and added notes about Angela's transfer to Atlanta. That evening, after adding the last detail to her growing file, Loretta called Glenda. Her sister picked up on the first ring. "Carlos had lunch with me today," Loretta said without preamble. "Raymond's been telling people at industry events that we're separated. Has been for at least 18 months. Creating cover, building a narrative. There are witnesses and photos." There was a moment of silence on the line. Then Glenda said one word. "Good. The attorney consultation is still on for Monday?" 9 a.m. sharp, Glenda confirmed. "I'll pick you up at 8:30. Monday morning arrived with a crisp certainty. Glenda pulled up at exactly 8:30, her notary stamp and a fresh legal pad in her bag. The attorney's office was downtown, a modest suite with frosted glass doors and comfortable chairs. Sarah Martinez, the attorney Glenda had known for 20 years, welcomed them into her office with professional warmth. Loretta placed her documentation folder on the desk. It was thick. 3 months of methodical collection condensed into organized sections. Sarah reviewed the contents carefully. The property deeds, account statements, Raymond's 401k documents, the rental property information, and the timeline of discovered messages. "Under state law," Sarah explained, "you're entitled to an equitable division of all marital assets. That includes the house, retirement accounts, the rental property, and any joint investments." She paused, studying a statement. "Before we proceed with any filing, I strongly recommend a complete audit of all shared accounts. People who hide relationships often hide money, too." Loretta nodded. "I can do that tonight. I manage all our bookkeeping." "Perfect," Sarah said. "Document everything, transfers, withdrawals, any pattern of movement. If you find anything suspicious, we'll need records going back at least 18 months. That evening, after Raymond left for his weekly sales meeting, Loretta sat at her desk with her laptop open and her accounting software running. She began with their main investment account, the one they'd built over 20 years of careful saving. She downloaded 18 months of statements and began her review. The first discrepancy appeared in last year's April statement, a transfer of $2,800 to an account number she didn't recognize. In May, another transfer, $3,200. June brought 2 smaller movements, one $500 and one $800. Each amount was carefully calibrated to stay under the $5,000 threshold that would trigger automatic notifications. Loretta's fingers moved steadily across her keyboard, building a spreadsheet. July, $2,900. August, 2 transfers of $2,000 each. September, $3,400. The pattern continued month after month, like a slow leak draining their shared resources. She traced the receiving account number. It led to a separate bank entirely, an account opened 14 months ago under Raymond's name alone. When she finished her analysis, the total made her sit back in her chair, $46,800. Nearly $47,000, extracted incrementally from their marital assets while she managed the household and handled everyone's tax documents and made his coffee every morning exactly the way he liked it. She printed everything, the statements, the transfer records, her detailed spreadsheet analysis. She added it to her documentation folder, then made 2 copies, one for Sarah, one for her private records. The next afternoon, she met Devante at Glenda's house. They sat in Glenda's sunny kitchen while Loretta laid out the complete picture, the pre-wedding messages between Raymond and Brianna, the conference photos showing Raymond's carefully constructed separation narrative, and now the methodically hidden financial transfers. "He's been planning this," she explained, her voice steady. "Creating social cover at work, moving money gradually, building a separate life while maintaining the appearance of this one. He was going to leave on his own timeline, after he'd positioned everything exactly how he wanted it. Devante studied the financial records, his jaw tight. "What do you need me to do?" "Protect yourself first," Loretta said. "Separate your finances from Brianna's. Stop any joint purchases. Move anything irreplaceable, your grandmother's watch, the savings bonds, your grandfather's coin collection, to a secure location in your name only. I have a friend who practices family law," Devante said. "I'll call him tomorrow." "Good," Loretta nodded. "Do everything quietly, don't raise any alarms. Let them think we're all still exactly who they believe we are, the wife who doesn't look too closely, the son who doesn't want to make waves." That evening, standing in her kitchen, Loretta picked up her phone and called Raymond. Her voice was warm, unhurried, the same voice that had asked about his day for 32 years. "I was thinking," she said, "of having Glenda over for dinner on Sunday. Devante and Brianna, too. Just family." "Sure," Raymond said, distracted as always. "That sounds fine. Do you have any preference for what I cook?" "Whatever you want is fine with me." "Perfect," Loretta said, and she meant it completely. She hung up and looked around her kitchen, the space she had managed for 3 decades, the room where she had made herself smaller and smaller while Raymond made plans she wasn't supposed to notice. She touched her documentation folder, now thick with evidence. Everything was ready. The autumn sun slanted through Loretta's kitchen windows as she moved between counter and stove, each motion precise and purposeful. She had been cooking since early morning. Oxtails stewed until the meat fell from the bone, mac and cheese with the perfect golden crust, collard greens seasoned exactly the way Raymond always praised at church gatherings. The house filled with familiar scents, layers of comfort built over 32 years of Sunday dinners. Glenda arrived first, letting herself in with the key she'd had since 1991. She stood in the kitchen doorway watching her sister work, her expression caught between pride at Loretta's composure and grief for what was about to unfold. Neither of them spoke about what was coming. They didn't need to. "Need any help?" Glenda asked, though she already knew the answer. "Everything's under control," Loretta said, her voice steady as she checked the cornbread in the oven. The surface was perfectly golden brown, just starting to crack at the edges. She had made it the way their mother taught them. Cast iron skillet, preheated with butter until it sizzled when the batter hit. Raymond wandered through occasionally, commenting on how good everything smelled. Each time, Loretta answered with the same warm tone she'd used for decades. Each time, Glenda's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. At 4 o'clock, Devante's car pulled into the driveway. Through the kitchen window, Loretta watched her son help Brianna from the passenger seat. Such a small gesture, but it carried the weight of appearances they were all still maintaining. Brianna smoothed her dress, checked her lipstick in her compact mirror, and plastered on a smile that Loretta now saw clearly for what it was: armor made of charm. They gathered around the dining room table, Raymond at the head where he'd always sat, Brianna and Devante on one side, Glenda on the other. Loretta brought out the dishes one by one, arranging everything just so. The table looked like a magazine photo, like every Sunday dinner she'd ever served, like nothing was different at all. "This looks amazing, Mom," Devante said, and beneath his words Loretta heard what he was really saying. "I see how much work you put into this final performance." "Everything smells wonderful," Brianna added, her voice pitched to that perfect daughter-in-law note that had once seemed so natural and now rang hollow. "You really didn't have to go to all this trouble." "It's no trouble," Loretta replied, serving Raymond first as she always did. "Family dinner is never trouble." The meal unfolded like a play where only half the cast knew the real script. Dishes were passed, compliments were offered. Raymond told a story about a client meeting that made everyone laugh, but Loretta noticed how Brianna's laugh came just a fraction too quickly, how her eyes darted to Raymond's face to gauge his reaction. "Remember that time," Raymond said, launching into another story, his voice too loud in the careful quiet. "When Devante was maybe 12, and he tried to make breakfast in bed for Mother's Day?" Loretta watched him as he talked, really looked at him. This man she had built a life around, who sat at her table telling old family stories while carefully constructed lies lived in his phone, in his secret account, in the guest room where he thought she would never look. Brianna leaned forward, hanging on Raymond's words with an eagerness that seemed obvious now that Loretta knew to look for it. Even her posture was a performance, the attentive daughter-in-law, the perfect addition to their family. Loretta wondered how she had ever missed the desperation beneath that polished surface. As the meal wound down, Glenda started gathering plates. "Why don't you all head to the living room?" she suggested. "Loretta and I can handle cleanup." "Oh, let me help," Brianna offered immediately, starting to rise. "It's the least I can do." "Actually," Loretta said, her voice warm as honey but firm as steel beneath, "that would be wonderful, Brianna. You can stay and help me. Glenda, why don't you join everyone in the living room?" Devante caught his mother's eye across the table. She gave him the smallest nod, barely a movement at all. He understood immediately. "Come on, Dad," he said, standing. "Let's give them some space to clean up." Raymond pushed back from the table, still chuckling at his own story. Glenda followed them out, closing the living room door behind her with a soft click that seemed to echo in Loretta's ears. In the kitchen, Brianna gathered plates with efficient movements, still wearing that perfect smile. Loretta watched her for a moment, then stepped to the kitchen door and closed it deliberately. The sound made Brianna turn. Loretta faced her daughter-in-law. The warmth drained from her expression, not replaced by anger or hurt, but by something far more precise and devastating. Something that made Brianna's carefully maintained smile begin to fade before a single word was spoken. The kitchen hummed with the quiet aftermath of dinner, dishes in the sink, serving bowls half empty on the counter, the lingering warmth of the oven slowly cooling. Brianna moved between counter and sink with practiced efficiency, still wearing her perfect daughter-in-law smile like it was painted on. Loretta closed the kitchen door with deliberate care. The soft click made Brianna turn, her hands full of plates. "I know everything," Loretta said, her voice low and steady. "And I want you to hear that clearly before we go back in there." The plates trembled slightly in Brianna's hands. She opened her mouth, but Loretta held up one finger. "Put those down first," she said. "You'll want both hands empty for this conversation." Brianna set the plates in the sink. When she turned back, her smile had slipped just slightly at the corners. "Loretta, It started before the wedding," Loretta continued, as if Brianna hadn't spoken. 11 days before my son stood in that church and promised himself to you, you were already exchanging messages with his father. I have them all, every single one." The color drained from Brianna's face. She gripped the counter behind her. The mentorship excuse, the late-night texts, the conferences where Raymond told everyone he was basically separated while you stood next to him in photos, both of you thinking nobody who mattered would see them. Loretta's voice remained measured, each word precise as a surgeon's cut. "I understand what you were looking for. You wanted someone to make you feel chosen, elevated, ahead of where you started. Raymond was willing to play that role for you, and you told yourself it was real." "It is real," Brianna whispered, but her voice shook. "No," Loretta said simply. "It's not. I made the same mistake 32 years ago, except I had the disadvantage of marrying mine. Raymond doesn't know how to make anything real. He only knows how to perform it." In the living room, they could hear Raymond's laugh, too loud, too confident, still believing he was the smartest person in any room he occupied. "My son is going to walk out of this marriage," Loretta continued. "The divorce will not be in your favor. The documentation is extensive and it will be public. You should start figuring out who you are without borrowed validation, because Raymond is not going to be the answer to that question." Brianna's carefully maintained composure cracked. "You don't understand." "I understand everything," Loretta cut in. "That's what makes this conversation possible. Now, we're going to walk back in there, and you're going to smile that lovely smile you've perfected, and we're going to have dessert. Then you're going to go home with my son for the last time." She opened the kitchen door. "Come on back," she called to the living room. "There's dessert." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of tension barely contained beneath social pleasantries. Glenda left first, squeezing Loretta's hand as she went. Devante stood next, helping Brianna with her coat, one final performance of the husband he had been. They drove away together, and Loretta watched through the window, knowing this was their last car ride as a married couple. When the house was empty except for her and Raymond, Loretta poured herself a glass of water. She sat across from him at the dining room table and placed a thick manila folder between them. "We need to talk," she said. Raymond's smile was automatic, practiced. "About what?" She opened the folder. "About the $47,000 you've been moving from our joint investment account. About the conferences where you told colleagues we were separated. About our son's wife." The smile froze, then slipped. "Loretta, I have everything," she continued calmly. "The transfer records, the emails, the photos, the timeline going back to before Devontae's wedding. I've spoken with an attorney. You can contest this and we can let everyone see exactly what's in this folder, or we can handle it cleanly. You have 72 hours to decide." Raymond's face cycled through expressions. Dismissal first, then attempt at minimizing, finally landing on blame. "You checked out of this marriage years ago," he said, his voice hard. "After your health scare, you just became inconvenient?" Loretta finished. "Became less decorative? Less useful as a prop in your performance of success?" He stared at the folder. For the first time in their marriage, he had no response that fit the situation he was in. Loretta picked up her water glass. "Good night, Raymond," she said, standing. She walked to their bedroom, her bedroom, in her house, and closed the door behind her. Through the wall, she could hear him still sitting at the table, alone with the evidence of everything he thought she would never find. The divorce papers landed on Raymond's desk exactly 72 hours after that Sunday dinner. He signed them without contest. Within 2 weeks, the $47,000 reappeared in the joint investment account. A quiet admission of guilt, wrapped in a bank transfer. 6 weeks later, the settlement was final. Loretta kept the house she had maintained for 3 decades, the rental property she had managed alone, her full share of retirement accounts, and a cash settlement that reflected 32 years of documented financial and domestic labor. Raymond took his clothes, his company car, and significantly less than he had planned for. The professional consequences arrived like steady rainfall, not in a single destructive burst, but in a persistent pattern that soaked through everything he had built. It started with whispers at the regional office. Someone who attended the same conferences where Raymond had presented himself as basically separated connected the full picture. The affair with his daughter-in-law, the hidden account, the years of careful performance. The story moved through his professional network the way these stories always do, quietly, efficiently, and permanently. His regional director position was restructured in a meeting that lasted exactly 12 minutes. They offered him a lateral move, same salary, lower title, different department. He took it because he couldn't afford not to, not with the apartment lease he had just signed and the settlement payments due. The promotion he had spent 18 months positioning himself for evaporated without comment. He told people the divorce was mutual. No one who knew Loretta believed him. Brianna's fall was slower but more publicly humiliating. When Devontae filed for divorce, he did so with the complete documentation. Email archives spanning years, message histories, time-stamped photos, the full record of an affair that began before their wedding. His attorney used it to establish clear fault. Brianna, who had built her life around a carefully curated image of the young, polished, upwardly mobile professional wife, watched that image shatter against the documented truth of what she had done. Their shared social circle sided with Devontae immediately and completely. The couples they had hosted for dinner parties, the friends they had vacationed with, the professional contacts they shared. They all heard the same version because the truth was thoroughly documented and Devontae did not hide it. She lost the apartment. It had always been in his name. She lost recommendations from professional contacts who had known them as a couple. She lost the future she thought she was building. Raymond, whom she had believed was her pathway to that future, called twice in the first month after everything collapsed. Then he stopped calling. She moved back to her mother's house in Arizona, not as someone making a fresh start, but as someone who had been unmistakably run out of town by the weight of what she had done. 14 months passed like water finding its level. Loretta repainted the house in colors she had circled in magazines for 15 years. Deep terracotta in the living room, sage green in the kitchen. Colors Raymond had always called too much, too bold, too attention-seeking. They weren't too much. They were exactly right. Her practice expanded under its new name, L. James Financial Services. She hired a junior accountant on retainer. Corporate clients started calling. Her reputation for precision and discretion had spread. She and Glenda took 10 days in Portugal, eating everything, staying out late, buying clothes they would never have bought before. Loretta wore a bright fitted dress to dinner on their last night and felt, for the first time in years, like the full version of herself. Devante started therapy. He was honest about how much he needed it. He began seeing someone new, carefully, quietly, without announcements. Sometimes at Sunday dinner, Loretta caught him smiling at his phone the way he used to smile before he spent 4 years bracing for impact. His laugh came easier now. The house felt lighter when he was in it. Early morning light streamed through the kitchen windows. Loretta sat at the table, both hands wrapped around the good coffee mug, the one she had always saved for guests, and watched the sun rise over a house that was hers in every room. She was not making anyone else's coffee. The kitchen was quiet, but it wasn't the hollow quiet of emptiness. It was the quiet of room. Room to breathe, room to move, room to fill the space she had always been meant to occupy. Room that had always been there, waiting for her to claim it. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.